Emma Reynolds stepped into her third-grade classroom at Pine Grove Elementary, breathing in the familiar scent of chalk dust and freshly sharpened pencils. At 26, she embodied the enthusiasm of a newly married woman and the dedication of a teacher who had found her true calling. The morning sun streamed through the classroom windows, illuminating the colorful bulletin boards she had meticulously decorated with her students' latest art projects. Each child's name was carefully displayed above their work, a testament to her belief that every student deserved to feel special. The golden band on her left hand still felt new, catching the light as she wrote the day's schedule on the whiteboard. Just 18 months into her marriage to David Carter, Emma still found herself absently twirling the ring during quiet moments, smiling at the memory of their modest but beautiful wedding in her parents' backyard. David had insisted on building the arch they married under himself, a perfect representation of the steady, reliable man she had fallen in love with. Their love story had begun 3 years earlier, when Emma was fresh out of college and starting her first year of teaching. David, then a foreman working his way up in Carter construction, had been overseeing the renovation of Pine Grove's gymnasium. Their first conversation happened over a dropped stack of spelling tests, papers scattering across the construction site. David had helped her gather every last sheet, making sure not a single student's work was lost. His attention to detail and genuine concern had captured her heart immediately. Now, at 32, David had recently been promoted to project manager, his dedication to quality work finally paying off. Their combined incomes had allowed them to purchase their first home in the growing suburb of Millbrook, Texas, a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style house with a yard big enough for the family they hoped to start. The neighborhood was filled with young families and retirees, creating a warm community atmosphere that reminded Emma of her own childhood in small-town Texas. The faculty lounge at Pine Grove had become Emma's second home, where she found friendship among fellow teachers who had welcomed her warmly from her first day. Zoe Martinez, the 4th-grade teacher next door, had become particularly close to Emma, their shared lunch breaks filled with conversations about teaching strategies and, increasingly, Zoe's gentle prodding about when Emma and David might start a family of their own. "You two were made to be parents," Zoe would say, watching how naturally Emma handled even the most challenging students. Emma would smile and change the subject, not ready to share the quiet conversations she and David had been having about waiting until they were more financially stable. David's colleagues at Carter Construction had similarly embraced Emma as one of their own. Monthly barbecues at various homes had become a tradition, with Emma's homemade potato salad gaining legendary status among the crew. These gatherings were where Emma felt most content, watching David in his element, respected by his peers and clearly proud of the life they were building together. It was during one of these seemingly perfect weeks that Emma first encountered Ryan Thompson. The meeting itself was unremarkable, a simple interaction at the local gym where Emma had recently started morning workouts at Zoe's encouragement. "You need something that's just for you," her friend had insisted, and Emma had finally relented. The gym was only 10 minutes from the school, allowing Emma to squeeze in early morning workouts before heading to class. On this particular morning, she was struggling with adjusting a weight machine when a voice offered assistance. "You might want to lower the weight to start," the voice suggested, belonging to a man who introduced himself as Ryan, a local business owner who had been coming to this gym for years. His help was professional and brief, but something about his presence lingered in Emma's mind. Perhaps it was the way he moved with such confidence, or how his smile seemed to hold a hint of something she couldn't quite identify. She noticed his wedding ring, similar to the one she twisted on her own finger, and felt a moment of connection. Two married people, starting their days in the same space. That evening, as Emma prepared dinner in their cozy kitchen, she mentioned the encounter to David in passing. He was distracted, focused on blueprints spread across their dining room table, responding with a non-committal, "That's nice, honey." It was a small moment, unremarkable really, but it would later be remembered as the first crack in their perfect facade. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Emma's mornings at the gym became more consistent, her days in the classroom remained fulfilling, and her evenings with David continued their predictable pattern. Yet beneath this surface of domestic tranquility, subtle changes were beginning to take root. David's work hours grew longer as he took on more responsibility with his promotion. Emma found herself looking forward to her morning gym sessions with an intensity that surprised her. At school, Emma maintained her reputation as the teacher parents requested for their children. Her classroom was a haven of organization and warmth, with students thriving under her patient guidance. Fellow teachers often sought her advice on handling difficult students, impressed by her natural ability to connect with children. But in quiet moments, when her students were focused on their work, Emma sometimes caught herself daydreaming about a different kind of life. These thoughts were vague, undefined, more feelings than concrete desires. She would quickly push them aside, focusing instead on the next lesson plan, the next parent conference, the next dinner she would prepare for David. The Carters had recently hosted their first housewarming party, a milestone that seemed to cement their status as a successful young couple. Their modest home had been filled with colleagues from both their workplaces, the air humid with Texas evening heat and the sounds of laughter. David had proudly given tours, pointing out the improvements he planned to make, while Emma played the perfect hostess, ensuring everyone's glasses stayed full. As the party wound down, Zoe had pulled Emma aside. "You've got it all figured out, don't you?" she had said, a hint of envy in her voice. Emma had smiled and nodded, ignoring the small voice inside that whispered questions she wasn't ready to acknowledge. That night, after the last guest had left and David had fallen asleep, Emma stood in their bathroom, staring at her reflection. She was the picture of a happily married young teacher, pretty in an approachable way, successful but not intimidatingly so, loved by her students and respected by her peers. Everything was exactly as it should be. Yet as she crawled into bed beside her sleeping husband, Emma felt a restlessness she couldn't name. The next morning, she would head to the gym earlier than usual, telling herself it was just to avoid the crowd. She wouldn't acknowledge that a part of her hoped to see Ryan again, to experience that brief moment of connection that felt so different from the comfortable predictability of her daily life. In the quiet darkness of their bedroom, the sound of David's steady breathing beside her, Emma Reynolds had no way of knowing that her perfect life was balanced on the edge of a precipice. The choices she would make in the coming months would shatter not only her own carefully constructed world but would send ripples of destruction through the lives of everyone around her. Thompson's Auto Care stood as a testament to Ryan Thompson's understanding of both machines and people. At 34, he had built his reputation in Millbrook through a combination of honest work and natural charisma. His shop, with its red brick facade and spotless service bays, occupied a prime location on Main Street, drawing a steady stream of loyal customers who trusted his expertise and appreciated his straightforward approach to repairs. The early morning hours before opening the shop had always been Ryan's time for reflection. The gym became his sanctuary, a place where the rhythmic movement of weights and the steady hum of treadmills helped quiet the thoughts that kept him awake at night. His marriage to Jessica, once filled with passionate declarations and shared dreams, had slowly transformed into an exercise in logistics, coordinating their children's activities, managing household finances, and maintaining appearances in their close-knit community. Jessica's transformation from the vibrant woman he'd married into an increasingly distant partner happened so gradually that Ryan couldn't pinpoint when things changed. Their conversations had become perfunctory, focused on practical matters rather than the deep emotional connections they once shared. At night, they slept with a careful distance between them, the space of physical manifestation of their growing emotional divide. The morning Ryan first noticed Emma struggling with the weight machine, something stirred in him that he'd thought long dormant. Her determination was evident in the set of her jaw, the slight furrow of her brow as she attempted to adjust the settings. When he offered help, her grateful smile triggered a response that went beyond mere courtesy. Their early interactions followed a pattern of casual gym acquaintance, shared nods across exercise equipment, brief exchanges about proper form, and light-hearted comments about the challenges of early morning workouts. Ryan found himself looking forward to these encounters, unconsciously timing his routines to coincide with Emma's arrival. As weeks passed, their conversations deepened. Between sets and cool-down periods, they began sharing fragments of their lives. Emma spoke of her third-grade classroom challenges, her voice animated as she described particularly difficult students or breakthrough moments. Ryan found himself opening up about the pressures of running his business, the weight of responsibility for his employees' livelihoods, and the constant struggle to stay competitive in an increasingly chain-dominated industry. The first time Emma laughed at one of his jokes, a genuine, unguarded sound, Ryan felt a jolt of electricity course through him. He began seeking ways to elicit that response, sharing humorous stories about difficult customers or mishaps at the shop. Their conversations started extending beyond their workout times, lingering in the gym parking lot as dawn broke over the Texas horizon. The transition from gym acquaintances to something more intimate happened almost imperceptibly. A broken water fountain led to their first coffee meeting at the diner across the street. Ryan noticed how Emma's fingers wrapped around her coffee mug, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking deeply about something he'd said. These small details began occupying his thoughts during long hours at the shop. Their coffee meetings became a cherished ritual, carefully timed and chosen at a location far enough from both their workplaces to avoid familiar faces. Each meeting lasted longer than the last, their chairs gradually shifting closer together as their conversations delved into increasingly personal territory. Emma confided her fears about becoming stagnant, while Ryan shared his growing sense of disconnection from the life he'd built. The first time their hands touched, reaching for the same sugar packet, both felt a shock of recognition. The brief contact sent sparks through them, leaving an imprint that lingered long after they'd parted ways. That night, Ryan lay awake, replaying the moment in his mind, while across town, Emma did the same. Their growing attraction became a presence in every interaction. Ryan found himself noticing details about Emma that haunted him throughout the day: the graceful line of her neck as she stretched, the slight dimple that appeared when she smiled, the way her workout clothes hugged her figure. Emma, in turn, became acutely aware of Ryan's physical presence, his strong hands, capable of both powerful work and gentle gestures, the breadth of his shoulders, the intensity in his eyes when he looked at her. The purchase of the burner phone marked a significant escalation in their relationship. Ryan bought it on a Tuesday afternoon, telling himself it was just for emergencies. The first message he sent to Emma was simple, a test of their new connection. Her response came quickly, and soon their hidden communications took on a life of their own. Their messages became increasingly intimate, a digital diary of mounting desire and growing emotional attachment. Late at night, when their respective spouses slept unknowing beside them, they would exchange thoughts that couldn't be voiced in daylight. Ryan wrote about how Emma's presence had awakened something in him he thought was lost forever. Emma described the way thoughts of him invaded her classroom, making it hard to focus on teaching. The guilt came in waves for both of them. Ryan found it increasingly difficult to engage with Jessica's attempts at conversation, his mind constantly drifting to thoughts of Emma. During family dinners, he would check his hidden phone compulsively, eager for any message from the woman who had come to occupy his thoughts. Emma struggled with similar demons, her interactions with David becoming strained and distant. Their first kiss happened on a foggy morning in the gym parking lot, hidden between cars in the pre-dawn darkness. The brief contact was electric, shattering any pretense of innocent friendship. Both pulled away breathing heavily, equal parts exhilarated and terrified by what they'd done. That kiss changed everything, marking the point of no return in their relationship. As autumn approached, their attraction had grown into an all-consuming force. Their gym sessions became charged with unspoken desire, each casual touch carrying the weight of their shared secret. They developed an elaborate system of coded messages and planned encounters, their deception becoming more sophisticated as their relationship deepened. Ryan found himself making excuses to check his phone throughout the day, his heart racing whenever he saw a message from Emma. She began inventing after-school meetings and professional development sessions, creating pockets of time they could spend together. Their secret relationship had become a parallel life, existing alongside but separate from their marriages and public personas. The tension between them built like a gathering storm, powerful and impossible to ignore. Both recognized the danger in their growing attachment, but neither could bring themselves to step back from the precipice. Their attraction had become a force of nature, as unstoppable as the Texas thunderstorms that rolled across the plains, promising both destruction and release. The web of lies began to spin itself with increasing complexity as autumn deepened in Millbrook. Emma's classroom, once her sanctuary, became the staging ground for her elaborate deceptions. She crafted fictional parent-teacher conferences, invented curriculum planning sessions, and fabricated district meetings with meticulous attention to detail. Each excuse was carefully documented in her planner, a growing testament to her mounting betrayals. The new reading program needs extra preparation time, she would tell David, her voice steady as she packed her bag for another clandestine meeting with Ryan. Her husband would nod, distracted by his own work concerns, while Emma fought the familiar surge of guilt that accompanied each lie. The ease with which the deceptions now flowed from her lips both thrilled and terrified her. At Thompson's Auto Care, Ryan developed his own repertoire of excuses. Supplier meetings, emergency repairs, and client consultations became his cover stories. He started keeping a detailed log of his fictitious appointments, knowing that in a town like Millbrook, one inconsistency could unravel everything. Jessica's growing suspicion manifested in subtle ways: lingering looks over dinner, unexpected visits to the shop, casual questions about his schedule that felt like interrogations. Their meetings grew more frequent and intense. The local Comfort Inn, just off the highway, became their refuge. Ryan would book the rooms in cash, using different names each time. Emma learned to park her car behind the building, away from curious eyes. They developed a sixth sense for timing their arrivals and departures, never entering or leaving together. One evening, as they lay tangled in hotel sheets, Emma traced the lines of Ryan's face with trembling fingers. "Sometimes I forget who I really am anymore," she whispered. The confession hung heavy in the air between them. Ryan pulled her closer, understanding perfectly the duality of their existence. The strain of maintaining their double lives began showing in subtle ways. Emma's third-grade students noticed their usually cheerful teacher becoming distracted, her mind often wandering during lessons. At home, David commented on her increased phone usage, leading Emma to become more secretive with her burner phone, hiding it in a hollow book she'd carefully carved out. Ryan's work began to suffer. He found himself making careless mistakes on simple repairs, his thoughts constantly drifting to Emma. Jessica's intuition, honed by 8 years of marriage, picked up on the changes in her husband. The way he no longer met her eyes during conversations, how he would step outside to take phone calls, the growing distance in their bed at night. One Saturday afternoon, they had their first close call. Emma and Ryan had chosen a restaurant in the next town over, believing themselves safe from familiar faces. They sat in a back booth, lost in each other, when Emma spotted Zoe Martinez, her fellow teacher, being seated across the restaurant. The panic that ensued was instant and visceral. "If she sees us..." Emma's voice trailed off, her face draining of color. Ryan quickly threw cash on the table, and they executed their first hasty retreat. The adrenaline rush of nearly being caught added a new dimension to their affair. Fear began mixing with desire, danger with passion. Their burner phone communications evolved into an art form. They developed codes within codes. Looking at paint samples meant Jessica was suspicious. Grading science projects indicated David was asking questions. Their messages became both a lifeline and a source of constant anxiety, each notification carrying the potential for discovery. The financial aspect of their affair required increasing creativity. Ryan started keeping a separate cash reserve, making small ATM withdrawals from different locations to avoid patterns. Emma began volunteering for extra school activities that came with stipends, using the money to fund their encounters. Every receipt, every transaction had to be carefully considered and concealed. Jessica's suspicions grew stronger as autumn turned to winter. She began noting Ryan's mileage, questioning discrepancies in his schedule, and paying closer attention to his gym habits. "You've been so dedicated to fitness lately," she commented one morning, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. Ryan felt the net of suspicion tightening around him. The strain began manifesting physically. Emma lost weight, dark circles appearing under her eyes despite her careful makeup. Ryan developed insomnia, spending long nights in his garage, ostensibly working on a project car but really avoiding his marriage bed and the guilt that lay there. Their passion, however, only intensified under the pressure. Each stolen moment became more precious, more desperate. Their hotel encounters took on an almost frantic quality, as if they could sense time running out. "I can't lose this," Ryan would murmur against Emma's skin. "I can't lose you." The small town that had once felt comfortable now seemed to be closing in around them. Every trip to the grocery store carried the risk of seeing someone who might question why the auto shop owner was buying coffee at 7 a.m. when his shop didn't open until 8. Every school event became a minefield of potential discovery, with Emma hyper-aware of any interaction between David and Ryan. One evening, while helping their 6-year-old with homework, Jessica noticed Ryan's hand trembling as he reached for his phone. The look she gave him spoke volumes. She knew something was wrong, even if she couldn't prove what. That night, she lay awake beside him, cataloging changes in her husband. The new cologne, the gym dedication, the emotional distance that seemed to grow daily. Emma's relationship with David deteriorated in subtle ways. Their once comfortable silences became charged with unspoken tensions. She found herself picking fights over minor issues, perhaps subconsciously trying to justify her infidelity. David's attempts at physical intimacy were met with increasingly elaborate excuses, leaving him confused and hurt. The pressure of maintaining their secret began affecting their professional lives. Emma's principal commented on her seeming distraction during staff meetings. Ryan's employees noticed their boss's increasingly erratic behavior, mood swings that ranged from intense focus to complete distraction. Yet despite the mounting pressure, or perhaps because of it, their attraction only grew stronger. Each risk taken, each lie told, seemed to bind them closer together. Their hotel room became a confessional booth where they shared their deepest fears and desires, the only place where they felt they could truly be themselves. "We need to be more careful," Emma would say after each close call, even as she melted into Ryan's embrace. But being careful became increasingly difficult as their passion grew more reckless. They began taking bigger risks, meeting in less discreet locations, extending their time together, sending messages more frequently. The weight of their deception became a tangible thing, pressing down on them both. Yet neither could bring themselves to end it. The thought of returning to their previous lives, of never feeling this intensity again, was more terrifying than the risk of discovery. As winter approached, the web of lies they had woven began to feel more like a noose. Each new deception required 2 more to support it. Each risk demanded greater ones to follow. They were trapped in a spiral of their own making, spinning faster and faster toward an inevitable collision with truth. The first crack in their carefully constructed facade appeared on a cold January morning. Jessica Thompson was organizing the laundry when a crumpled receipt fell from Ryan's gym shorts, a coffee shop charge from a town 30 miles away, time-stamped during what should have been his morning workout. Something about that small piece of paper, out of place and unexplained, triggered a cascade of memories. Ryan's changed behavior, his emotional distance, the endless emergency repairs that kept him working late. With trembling hands, Jessica began a methodical search of their home. Years of marriage had taught her Ryan's habits, his hiding places. In his garage workshop, tucked behind a toolbox, she found more receipts, hotels, restaurants in neighboring towns, gas stations at odd hours. Each piece of paper was another knife in her heart, building a timeline of betrayal she couldn't ignore. The discovery of the burner phone happened by accident. Jessica was cleaning Ryan's truck, something she'd done countless times before, when she noticed the loose panel under the passenger seat. The cheap phone she found there contained hundreds of messages, each one more damning than the last. Though the contact was unnamed, the intimate nature of the exchanges left little doubt about their meaning. The confrontation that followed shook the foundations of their home. Jessica waited until their children were at school, sitting quietly at their kitchen table with the phone and receipts laid out like evidence at a trial. "Who is she?" Jessica's voice was eerily calm when Ryan walked in. He froze in the doorway, his face draining of color at the sight of the phone. "How long has this been going on?" Ryan's attempts at denial crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The argument that followed was both explosive and devastating. Jessica's calm facade shattered as Ryan's evasions turned to partial admissions, then to desperate justifications. "You stopped seeing me years ago," he shouted, his own pain and guilt transforming into defensive anger. "We're just going through the motions, and you know it. So you decided to destroy our family." Jessica's voice broke. "To throw away everything we built." Across town, David Carter was experiencing his own dawning awareness. At a neighborhood barbecue, He watched Emma interact with their friends, noting how she seemed to be performing rather than participating. Her laughs were too loud, her smiles didn't reach her eyes, and she flinched almost imperceptibly when he touched her. The anonymous text came 2 days later. "Your wife is having an affair." David stared at his phone, feeling the world tilt beneath his feet. The message included dates, times, and locations, details too specific to ignore. His initial instinct was to dismiss it as a cruel prank, but pieces began falling into place. Emma's emotional distance, her excessive phone use, the changing passwords on her devices. Emma's world imploded when David confronted her with the text. Her denials sounded hollow even to her own ears. David's pain was evident in every question he asked, in the way his voice cracked when he demanded to know if he'd ever really known her at all. Their attempt at marriage counseling was a study in futility. Sitting in Dr. Anderson's warmly lit office, Emma and David tried to navigate their broken trust. Emma spoke of feeling stifled, of losing herself in the expectations of being the perfect wife and teacher. David countered with his own hurt and confusion, his belief that they'd been building a life together. "I don't know who you are anymore," David said during their third session, his voice heavy with defeat. "Maybe I never did." Meanwhile, Ryan and Jessica's counseling sessions became battlegrounds. Jessica's anger would erupt in accusations, while Ryan retreated further into defensive silence. Their counselor noted the lack of genuine effort at reconciliation from both parties. As their marriages crumbled, Emma and Ryan's desperation grew. They began meeting in increasingly risky locations, their need for each other overwhelming their caution. During one such meeting in the back of Ryan's shop, they started forming plans. Wild, improbable schemes of starting over somewhere new. "We could leave," Ryan whispered against Emma's hair. "Just drive until we find somewhere nobody knows us." The fantasy of escape became their shared addiction, a dream that sustained them through the chaos they'd created. Reality intruded in the form of lawyers' offices and custody discussions. Jessica's attorney was direct about Ryan's prospects. His infidelity would likely impact any custody arrangement for their children. Emma's lawyer painted an equally bleak picture of her future as a divorced teacher in a small town. "Your reputation in the community will be severely damaged," her lawyer warned. The school board tends to be conservative in these matters. The pressure began showing in their work lives. Ryan's shop saw a decline in customers as word spread through their small community. Emma received a subtle warning from her principal about maintaining appropriate professional standards. Their secret meetings took on an increasingly frantic quality. They clung to each other in cheap motel rooms, making promises they knew they couldn't keep. The reality of their situation, the lives they'd destroyed, the pain they'd caused, weighed heavily on both of them. "What have we done?" Emma sobbed one night, the full impact of their choices finally hitting her. Ryan had no answer, could only hold her as their carefully constructed world continued to crumble. The strain began affecting them physically. Emma lost more weight, while Ryan developed stress-induced insomnia. Their communication became erratic, sometimes desperately clingy, other times distant and afraid. Jessica's discovery of Emma's identity came through a small town's inevitable grapevine. The confrontation in the school parking lot became local legend, with Jessica's sharp words echoing across the asphalt. "You have children of your own. How could you?" David's reaction to learning Ryan's identity was quieter but no less devastating. He showed up at Thompson's auto care after hours, not for a confrontation, but simply to look his wife's lover in the eye. The silence between the two men spoke volumes about betrayal and broken trust. As their separate divorces proceeded, Emma and Ryan found their dream of a future together tarnished by reality. The excitement of forbidden love was being replaced by the mundane challenges of real life, financial struggles, custody battles, and community judgment. Their last meeting in their usual motel room felt different. The desperation remained, but something had changed. Looking at each other in the harsh fluorescent light, they both realized that what they'd broken could never be repaired, and what they'd built might not be strong enough to survive in daylight. February 14th dawned cold and gray in Millbrook, a bitter wind cutting through the Texas morning. The date, Valentine's Day, would later be noted with grim irony in police reports and newspaper headlines. At Thompson's Auto Care, Ryan arrived earlier than usual, his movements mechanical as he unlocked the shop. The security camera would later show him sitting in his office for nearly an hour, staring at his phone. In the pre-dawn hours, Ryan's message carried a tone of desperation. They needed to talk, everything was falling apart. Emma's quick response revealed her own crisis. David had discovered her meetings with the divorce lawyer and was threatening to expose her to the school board. Ryan's world contracted further with his next message, the revelation that Jessica was seeking full custody of their children. The finality in his words went unnoticed as Emma suggested meeting early at the shop, before anyone else arrived. She couldn't have known this exchange would be their last. The quiet desperation in their messages a prelude to the tragedy about to unfold. The security footage showed Emma's car pulling into the back lot at 6:45 a.m. She wore her usual work clothes, a navy blue dress and cardigan, looking every bit the elementary school teacher she was. The camera captured her glancing nervously over her shoulder before using the key Ryan had given her months ago to enter through the side door. What happened next would be pieced together through forensic evidence, witness statements, and the partial recording from Ryan's office security camera. The initial conversation appeared calm, both of them standing in Ryan's office, their body language tense but controlled. According to the timestamp, this lasted approximately 12 minutes. At 7:03 a.m., Jessica Thompson's SUV appeared in the camera frame, parking haphazardly across two spaces. She emerged clutching papers, later identified as divorce documents and evidence of additional hotel meetings. The security footage showed her striding purposefully toward the main entrance, her face set in determination. The next 4 minutes would change everything. According to witnesses at the coffee shop across the street, raised voices could be heard coming from the shop. Sandy Martinez, opening the cafe, would later tell detectives she heard a woman scream, "You destroyed everything," followed by what she thought was a car backfiring. The security camera captured Jessica running out of the shop at 7:08 a.m., her face pale, stumbling slightly as she reached her car. She sat there for nearly 30 seconds before pulling out her phone and making the first 911 call. Dispatch record, 7:09 a.m., 911, "What's your emergency?" Oh God, shots fired. Thompson's Auto Care. Please hurry. There's so much blood. Officer James Chen was the first responder on scene, arriving at 7:13 a.m. His body camera footage showed him approaching the side entrance, weapon drawn. The door was ajar, a woman's purse, later identified as Emma's, spilled across the threshold. Inside, the scene told a story of rapid escalation and violence. Ryan's office, normally meticulously organized, was in disarray. The desk was overturned, papers scattered across the floor. 2 shell casings lay near the doorway. And in the center of the room, crime scene report, February 14th, 2 victims discovered. Victim A, Emma Reynolds, sustained single GSW to upper chest, found face up near west wall. Victim B, Ryan Thompson, sustained GSW to right temple, found seated against south wall. Smith & Wesson .38 special recovered from victim B's right hand. The next hours were a blur of activity. Detective Zoe Ramirez arrived at 7:30 a.m., taking immediate control of the scene. Her initial notes described a tragedy born of desperation, as she began the painstaking process of documenting every detail. The shop's waiting room became an impromptu command center. Evidence technicians worked methodically, photographing and collecting items. The gun, shell casings, phones, scattered papers. Blood pattern analysis suggested Emma had been standing when shot, likely facing her assailant. Ryan's position and the evidence indicated self-infliction. Outside, the community began to gather. News traveled fast in Millbrook. David Carter arrived at 8:15 a.m., his face ashen as officers held him back. His cry of anguish when Detective Ramirez delivered the news would haunt the first responders for months to come. The witnesses began trickling in. The barista from across the street who heard the shots. The early morning jogger who saw Emma arrive. The auto parts delivery driver who noticed Jessica's erratic parking job. Each account added another piece to the tragic puzzle. By noon, the investigation had established a preliminary timeline. Emma arrived first, likely hoping to discuss their deteriorating situation. Jessica's unexpected arrival, later revealed to be prompted by discovery of new evidence of their affair, triggered the confrontation. The exact details of those final moments remained unclear, but the outcome was devastatingly final. The security camera's audio, though muffled, captured fragments of the final exchange. "You can't do this to us. Everything's ruined. Please, just listen." Then two distinct gunshots, 13 seconds apart. CSI technicians worked through the afternoon, documenting every detail. They found Emma's phone clutched in her hand, a half-typed message still on the screen. "I'm SOR." The draft was never completed. The investigation revealed other details that painted a picture of premeditation. Ryan had left a detailed letter in his desk drawer, explaining his actions and expressing remorse for the pain he'd caused. His computer showed searches for quick death and painless suicide methods from the previous night. Local reporters gathered outside the police barrier, their presence adding to the circus atmosphere. Officer Chen described the scene in his report as a small-town tragedy playing out under the harsh lights of media attention. Detective Ramirez's preliminary report noted the bitter irony of the date and the tangled web of relationships that led to this moment. "In a small community like Millbrook," she wrote, "secrets have a way of surfacing. Sometimes, the weight of exposure proves too heavy to bear." The processing of the crime scene continued until dusk. Each piece of evidence told part of the story. Emma's broken necklace near the door, suggesting a physical struggle. Ryan's wedding ring placed deliberately on his desk. Jessica's dropped divorce papers, some pages stained with blood, scattered across the floor. As night fell over Millbrook, the yellow crime scene tape fluttering in the cold wind, Detective Ramirez made her final notes of the day. Two families shattered, a community in shock, and countless questions that would never be fully answered. The security camera's final footage showed the last normal moment. Emma walking into the shop, adjusting her cardigan, looking over her shoulder one last time. A teacher, a wife, a woman in love, with no idea she was walking into her final moments. Detective Zoe Ramirez's investigation began with the meticulous process of piecing together the final weeks leading to the tragedy at Thompson's Auto Care. The evidence room at Millbrook Police Department soon filled with carefully labeled boxes. Cell phones, security footage, financial records, and witness statements, each telling part of a larger story of passion and desperation. The cell phone analysis revealed the intricate web of deception. Digital forensics uncovered hundreds of deleted messages between Emma and Ryan on their burner phones, dating back months. Their communications painted a picture of mounting pressure, increasingly frantic exchanges about Jessica's suspicions, David's discoveries, and their dwindling options. The final messages exchanged that February morning carried an ominous tone that, in hindsight, should have raised alarms. Security footage from neighboring businesses provided crucial timeline verification. The camera at Wilson's Hardware captured Emma's arrival at 6:45 a.m., her Honda Civic moving slowly past the storefront before turning into the shop's back lot. The First Street coffee shop's cameras showed Jessica's SUV speeding through the intersection minutes before the shooting. Each video fragment added another piece to the puzzle. The parent interviews proved particularly challenging. Detective Ramirez sat through dozens of testimonies from parents of Emma's third-grade students, each struggling to reconcile the caring teacher they knew with the woman at the center of this tragedy. Mrs. Peterson, whose daughter had been in Emma's class, broke down during her interview. "She helped my Sophie overcome her reading difficulties. How could she be the same person who?" The question hung unfinished, like so many others. Statements from Ryan's employees revealed subtle changes in his behavior during the affair. Marcus Chen, his head mechanic, described Ryan's increasing distraction, unusual phone habits, and unexplained absences. The shop was his life, Marcus told investigators. Until it wasn't. The staff had noticed Jessica's surprise visits becoming more frequent, the tension between the couple palpable. The breakthrough in understanding the tragedy's catalyst came from an unexpected source. The credit card statement from Jessica's personal account showed a payment to Andrew's private investigations 3 weeks before the shooting. Detective Ramirez tracked down the PI, whose surveillance photos and detailed reports documented Emma and Ryan's meetings. These files had been delivered to Jessica the day before the tragedy, including footage of them entering a hotel together. Though no arrests would be made, the case technically closed with the deaths of both primary parties. The legal aftermath continued. David Carter filed wrongful death suits against Ryan's estate and Thompson's auto care. Jessica Thompson faced her own legal battles, fighting insurance companies that initially refused to pay out Ryan's life insurance policy due to the circumstances of his death. The impact on Millbrook proved far-reaching. Pine Grove Elementary struggled to explain the tragedy to young students while providing counseling support. Ryan's auto shop, once a town fixture, stood empty for months, its windows covered with brown paper, a silent reminder of what had transpired within its walls. The town divided into camps, those who saw Emma and Ryan as victims of passion and circumstance, and others who condemned them for destroying two families. The Sunday after the tragedy, Pastor Mike's sermon at First Baptist touched on forgiveness and judgment, though many noted the Thompson and Carter pews sat empty. Local businesses felt the ripple effects. The gym where Emma and Ryan first met lost several members who couldn't bear the association. The coffee shop where they'd held their clandestine meetings saw a temporary decline in customers, as if their tragedy had somehow tainted the space. The investigation files painted a picture of lives unraveled by desire and deception. Bank records showed ATM withdrawals from locations across 3 counties, hotel charges carefully hidden among business expenses, and the purchase of burner phones from various convenience stores. Each transaction marked another step toward their fatal conclusion. Emma's school records, subpoenaed as part of the investigation, revealed a gradual decline in her lesson planning and documentation. Her usually meticulous notes became sporadic. Her normally detailed parent communications grew brief and perfunctory. Her final grade book entries, made the day before her death, were incomplete, as if she'd known she wouldn't need to finish them. The security camera footage from Ryan's shop became crucial in reconstructing the final moments. Though the camera's audio was poor, forensic analysts enhanced the recording enough to capture fragments of the final confrontation. Jessica's arrival had triggered a cascade of events that ended in blood and gunshots. Detective Ramirez's final report, filed 6 weeks after the shooting, spanned over 300 pages. It documented the affair's progression from innocent gym encounters to secret meetings, from burner phones to hidden bank accounts, from whispered promises to desperate final moments. The report concluded that Ryan, faced with losing his children and confronted by both women, had made a fatal choice in those final moments. The media coverage eventually faded, but Millbrook's wounds ran deep. The tragedy became part of the town's fabric, a cautionary tale whispered at dinner parties, a shadow that fell across casual conversations about marriage and trust. The small Texas community had lost its innocence, forced to confront the reality that passion and desperation could destroy lives even in their quiet corner of the world. The Millbrook County Courthouse became ground zero for the civil proceedings that followed the tragedy at Thompson's Auto Care. While no criminal charges could be filed against the deceased, the civil suits filed by both families launched a legal battle that would expose every detail of the affair and its tragic end. David Carter's wrongful death suit against Ryan Thompson's estate forced the community to relive the tragedy through weeks of testimony. The courtroom fell silent as Zoe Martinez, Emma's fellow teacher, recounted the subtle changes she'd noticed in her friend. She stopped sharing lunch breaks with us, Zoe testified, her voice breaking. When I asked if something was wrong, she'd just say she was busy with lesson plans. I should have known. Jessica Thompson's testimony proved particularly devastating. Her voice steady but strained, she detailed discovering the burner phone, the hotel receipts, the gradual realization that her husband was slipping away. I hired the investigator because I needed proof, she explained. I never imagined. She couldn't finish the sentence, but everyone in the courtroom understood the weight of those unspoken words. Forensic experts reconstructed the final moments in clinical detail. Dr. Marcus Wells, the ballistics expert, used laser mapping to show the trajectory of each bullet, explaining how the physical evidence supported the sequence of events. Security camera footage, enhanced by FBI technical specialists, revealed the precise timeline of that fatal morning. The financial autopsy of the affair proved equally revealing. Forensic accountants traced the elaborate network of cash withdrawals, hidden hotel charges, and burner phone purchases. Each transaction told part of the story, how a casual friendship had evolved into a deadly obsession. The verdict, when it came, felt anticlimactic. The judge awarded substantial damages to both families, to be paid from Ryan's estate and business insurance. But no amount of money could repair the emotional devastation left in the wake of the tragedy. Pine Grove Elementary struggled to rebuild. Emma's third-grade classroom remained empty for weeks, substitute teachers refusing the long-term position. When Ms. Andrews finally took over the class, she found herself dealing with traumatized children who struggled to understand why their beloved teacher was never coming back. The impact on both families proved immeasurable. David Carter sold their house, unable to live with the memories it contained. He took a job in Houston, leaving Millbrook and its whispers behind. Jessica Thompson faced her own challenges, raising two children who couldn't understand why their father had done something so terrible. The Thompson children became the tragedy's most innocent victims. Their struggle to reconcile the loving father they knew with his final actions would require years of therapy. The older child, only 8, began having nightmares about guns and locked doors. The younger one, too young to fully understand, kept asking when Daddy was coming home. Trust in Millbrook changed fundamentally. Marriages that had seemed solid were suddenly viewed with suspicion. The gym where Emma and Ryan met saw membership decline as spouses questioned their partners' workout routines. The local hotels implemented stricter privacy policies, aware of their unwitting role in the tragedy. The warning signs, so clear in retrospect, became the subject of endless discussion. The auto shop's employees remembered Ryan's increasing distraction, his mysterious phone calls, his sudden mood swings. Emma's fellow teachers recalled her withdrawal from social activities, her declining enthusiasm for school events, her nervous energy when her phone buzzed. Pastor Mike's sermon 6 months after the tragedy addressed the community's need for healing. "We cannot let this tragedy define us," he urged his congregation. "But we must learn from it." The church established support groups for troubled marriages, though some noted the painful irony that such resources came too late for the Thompson and Carter families. The affair's impact rippled through Millbrook's social fabric. Parents became more protective of their children's teachers, viewing them through a lens of suspicion. Local business owners instituted stricter policies about employee relationships. The small-town trust that had once characterized Millbrook was replaced by awareness, a recognition that darkness could lurk behind the most respectable facades. 1 year after the tragedy, the town council debated what to do with Thompson's auto care. The building had stood empty, a silent monument to lives destroyed by passion and desperation. The decision to demolish it and create a small memorial park seemed fitting, a space for reflection rather than a reminder of tragedy. The local newspaper's anniversary article attempted to find meaning in the senseless deaths. The reporter interviewed Dr. Patricia Klein, a psychologist who had counseled several community members affected by the tragedy. "Affairs don't just happen," she explained. "They're built on a foundation of unmet needs and unspoken disappointments. The tragedy here isn't just in the deaths, but in the silence that preceded them." The final paragraph of Detective Ramirez's case file perhaps best summarized the lasting impact. In a small town like Millbrook, everyone is connected. When trust is broken and lives are lost, the damage extends far beyond the immediate families. This case reminds us that the deadliest weapons aren't always guns. Sometimes they're the secrets we keep and the lies we tell ourselves.